Good morning, everyone. Please settle in. Our service is about to begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Jersey Shore, a welcoming and inclusive faith community. We'd like to welcome any guests we have today. Thank you for taking a chance and joining us on this hot day. Hope you'll be sufficiently caffeinated. My name is Michael Clough, and I'm your associate this morning. I'm a member of this congregation, longtime member, and currently serve it in a number of ways, from giving technical help to playing guitar to designing the Black Lives Matter sign, which was recently stolen and quickly restored thanks to Jack Miller. You can probably tell from my headphones, I'm also part of the sound crew. So our service today is led by guest minister Rev Kim Hampton. Rev Kim is a native of St. Louis who has lived in places as varied as suburban Dallas to rural Indiana. A church and nonprofit consultant, Rev Kim is also a writer who is currently co-editing a book on theology and popular culture. We'll post video of this service on our website and our Facebook page later today. If you're using social media to post your reactions to the service, please use the hashtag #UUCSJS. If you would like to let us know of your joys and concerns, you can use the Zoom app. All you have to do is type them into the chat box area on your screen. Just look for the chat icon at either the top or the bottom of your screen of the app and click it and leave a comment, and you can even see what others have said. So please remember that this video will be on the internet, so don't share anything that might make you go viral. Welcome to worship. We light the chalice with these words from the book of Hebrews. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witness, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that easily distracts, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us. We hope you'll sing along with our gathering hymn, There Is More Love.
There is more love somewhere. on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. Joy, there is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
Apologies, everyone. I skipped the opening words. I am sorry to say I don't have them in front of me. They weren't in my script, which is why I skipped them. If Reverend Kim, I don't know if you happen to have the opening words handy.
I do.
Thank you.
Our opening words this morning. Welcome into this place of healing. Welcome into this place of challenge and of growth. Welcome into this place of imperfection and aspiration. You are whole in your brokenness. You are holy in your shame. You are wholly loved as you are.
And now we'll go to the Time for All Ages, also from Reverend Kim. Thank you.
The Time for All Ages this morning is a poem from my favorite poet, another Missouri native, Langston Hughes. Mother to son. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had cracks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark, where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on the steps, 'cause you finds it's kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
The next musical interlude is your last chance to give us your joys and sorrows for today. Again, just use the chat icon in your Zoom app, either the top or bottom of the app, depending on what device you're using, and just click it and type. After the music, I will read what you would share with everyone. Again, just remember that the entire service will be posted to the internet for all eternity, so don't share details you wouldn't want your manager or the New York Times to see. separated as we are by distance, we are joined this morning in spirit, brought together to seek comfort and encouragement, and to share those things in our lives that bring us joy or cause us sorrow. I will now read aloud what you offered to share. Deb Dagabarian says that it's very nice to see Judy P. and Betsy S. back together. I shouldn't use last names, I guess. Nice to see them back again. There's Michael Clefo, that's me. My daughter Grace is scheduled to return to college in Philly in late August. Thankfully, it looks like they have good COVID-19 procedures planned. Melissa is grateful for garden tomatoes, garlic, and basil. Barbara Miller is grateful for spiritual community. I see people close to me who could really use what we have together here every Sunday. May they be willing to take a chance and find us. Paul Utz, we continue to miss being with everyone in person. And Diane Dreby, thank you to Dennis for our weekly Sangha. It's been so very special. Karen York, thanks Jack for getting the Black Lives Matter sign up again. And Judy Pereira, the Adirondacks are flowing through my soul. Wonderful week up there with Betsy. And Reverend Kim will now lead us in the spirit of prayer.
And I was told that every week Ruth Bader Ginsburg is mentioned during this portion of the service. And so please keep her in mind while we're in our moment of prayer. Give us grace, O God of many names and no name, to dare to do the deed which we well know cries to be done. Let us not hesitate because of ease or the words of people's mouths or our own lives. Mighty causes are calling us. The freeing of those marginalized, the training of children, the putting down of hate and murder and poverty. All these and more. But they call with voices that mean work and sacrifice and death. Mercifully grant us, O God, the spirit of Esther, that we may say, I will go unto the king, and if I perish, I perish. Amen.
We will now take a moment to give and receive the morning offering. That looks and feels a little different when we are separated by distance. Rather than placing a check or cash in the basket, I ask you to consider a generosity practice of sending a check to our P.O. box or arranging a regular payment be sent through your bank. You can also use the donate button on our website to make a contribution. Each Unitarian Universalist congregation is self-supporting, and your financial support is essential since 80% of our income to support all that we do comes from the contributions of our members and friends. We hope that you will make a contribution at whatever level you can, and I remind you that no matter how those gifts are offered, they are always most gratefully received.
And a reading from Deuteronomy 34. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho, and the Lord showed him the whole land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. The Lord said to him, "This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, at the Lord's command. He was buried in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his burial place to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired and his vigor had not abated. The Israelites wept for Moses in the plains for Moab for 30 days. Then the period of mourning for Moses was ended.
Good morning. Good early morning. Good early morning. It's good to be with you all today. I'm going to take a guess that when you read the title for today's sermon, you were probably surprised by the second half of it. Yes, most of you use "don't sing gospel well." And there's a reason for that. And if things had gone the way I planned this week, you would have been party to my almost 20-year rant about why you use "don't sing gospel well." But three things happened this week. One, news filtered out on Thursday that badgeless officers from the Department of Homeland Security were abducting protesters in Portland, Oregon. Second, Friday mid-morning, came the news that Reverend C.T. Vivian died. And finally, late Friday night, Representative John Lewis died. So today is not going to be directly about why UUs don't sing gospel well. Although by the end you might figure out why I think that. Today is going to be about faith and loss. Today's reading is from the book of Deuteronomy. Seeing as though both John Lewis and C.T. Vivian went to seminary, I think they would appreciate that. The Hebrews had been wandering around in the wilderness for a little over 40 years, or 2 generations. A good number of the people who had left Egypt with Moses had already died. Aaron had died at that point. Miriam had died at that point. So Moses had lost a good deal of his own family in the wandering in the wilderness. And finally, they get to almost the promised land. And it's a long story, but Moses displeases God. And so God tells Moses that Moses is not going to enter the promised land. That happens a couple of chapters before our reading today. But in our reading today, Moses gets to see the promised land from high up. And I've always kind of visualized that almost like Charlton Heston in the 10 Commandments, looking down into the promised land. Except it's not Charlton Heston. I haven't figured out which actor would play Moses in my movie, but it's not Charlton Heston. But that feeling that one must get when you see something that you've worked for so close and yet so far, and knowing that you won't reach it. So when the news came out that John Lewis had died, at first it was like, is it real this time? Because last week there had been a fake announcement that he had died. And it's like, okay, we're not going to do anything until we absolutely hear from the family that he's died. And then the news was confirmed in multiple places. And Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. King, said, yeah, it's real. And you have to go, oh, it's real this time. And John Lewis was 80. So in terms that would be for anybody, he lived a good, long life. C.T. Vivian was 95. So he really did live a good, long life. And they saw some progress in the US, only to die while we're rolling back everything that the two of them worked for. Not only that, Elijah Cummings died in October. Another person who had fought all his life, even though he hadn't lived as long as either John Lewis or C.T. Vivian. He was only 68 when he died. But he died in the midst of the current occupant of the White House, calling the city that he loved rat-infested and a S-hole city. So it's hard to imagine that all three of them had faith that this could change. Now, both Elijah Cummings and John Lewis were actively working in Congress at the time they died. C.T. Vivian had never been in Congress, so he wasn't doing the work that way. But he had been speaking and doing as much as he could until just last year, when he had decided he was going to slow down a bit. You know, I think at 94, that was probably a good idea. And yet their work continues, hopefully. But I bring up the fact that all three of them were working because it was a matter of faith to them. In fact, C.T. Vivian had said that he thought that all of his work was spiritual work, not just political work. And so for the past day and a half or so, I've had this picture in my mind of the three of them, Elijah Cummings and C.T. Vivian and John Lewis, standing at Mount Nebo and seeing the promised land, knowing that they're not going to enter into it. Now, for those of you who know the biblical story, the promised land isn't all that it's cracked up to be, because there are people there already. And so the Hebrews, who become the Israelites when they cross over into the promised land, have to fight all the people who are already in the promised land. I've always thought it was interesting that the Israelites thought they had to fight the people who were in the promised land rather than work out agreements with everybody who was there and peacefully settle there. But human nature is as it is. And so they go in fighting. Again, if you know the biblical story, this actually doesn't turn out all that well. The Israelites lose quite a bit. They get conquered a few times. They have to go into exile. There's internal fighting. and so on. And part of the reason I always pick I love the Deuteronomy story, or at least the end of it, is that it is such a mirror into the modern world. So often we're fighting over stuff that there's no reason to fight over. That if we just made agreement, everybody could have everything that they need. Now, that sounds political. And it's actually not. C.T. Vivian was right. All of his work was spiritual. It came out in a political way, but all of his work, all of their work was spiritual. Because peace is a spiritual concept. The bounty, being able to share the bounty, is a spiritual concept. It is all spiritual. But thinking even more broadly about the three of them, Elijah Cummings and C.T. Vivian and John Lewis, they all had one other thing in common. Well, they had lots of things in common, but the big one is they were all deeply rooted into the church. And they never left it. And I think in these days where we talk about the rise of the nuns, and I could go into a long rant about how I hate that term, the rise of the nuns, and how there seems to be much anxiety about the change in the religious landscape. What is actually, if you look at the data, and actually probably if you just look around, is that religion is flourishing. It's not the religion of Emerson, though. Emerson was a wonderful man, don't get me wrong, although I can debate that. Emerson was good for his time. And the United States has changed in a multitude of ways since Emerson gave his divinity school address. And so when people talk about the rise of the nuns or the death of religion, I always go, or the death of the church, because I was raised in church too. I like to remind people that people have actually been predicting the death of the church since Jesus was on the cross. We're 2,000 years from that point. So I think maybe, just maybe, the church is going to survive. People have a natural wish to gather. And if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that while virtual is good and wonderful and necessary, lest we forget all of our friends and family who have situations where they can't join in person. Virtual is wonderful. Technology is good. But sometimes what we really need is the human touch. And so that brings us to loss. COVID has made it so that we've lost a lot of things and a lot of people. We're somewhere near 142,000 people dead. And from everything we know, a good number of those were preventable. So it seems as if we're all kind of standing at Mount Nebo, looking into a promised land. What that promised land is, I don't know. And if we take the story to its natural conclusion, it won't be what we thought it was. And if human nature stays the way human nature is, the story might not end well either, as it didn't end particularly well for the Israelites. But at least on Mount Nebo, we can see it. And what always strikes me about this part of chapter 34 is where the writer takes time to say that Moses's vision was unimpaired. For a 120-year-old man, that's saying something. Because I'm nowhere near that. And I'm going, okay, maybe it's time for me to go to the eye doctor. But that Moses' vision at 120 years old was unimpaired. That's something to shoot for. What would it mean for all of us to be on Mount Nebo with unimpaired vision, looking into the promised land? What would we see? What could we see? What could we imagine in the promised land? So faith and loss, they kind of work together. And so in this period of enormous grief, not just for C.T. Vivian and John Lewis and Emma Smith, who was another civil rights worker who died in the past 36 hours. Not just for them. Not just for the 142,000 or so people who've passed from COVID. But for all of the people who we normally never hear of, who die for reasons that make no sense. So whether it's a school shooting or just a random shooting or domestic violence or child abuse or anything that is unimaginable, all of that grief in this time where we don't know what tomorrow holds because we're in a transition to a new normal. That might be a promised land, but we don't know. And so we're sitting or standing or laying at Mount Nebo with the question of whether we are going to enter the promised land. And honestly, some of us won't. Moses didn't. Aaron didn't. Miriam didn't. As Torah tells us, none of the old generation made it into the promised land. Now, some of that's age. But some of that was thought process that a lot of people who could have made it into the promised land didn't, because they were either stuck in Egypt or stuck in the wilderness. And so we all, one and all, have a choice to make. We can either be stuck in Egypt, we can wander in the wilderness, or we can enter the promised land. The choice is always ours. But Mount Nebos aren't always there. So we have to make the choice every day, whether there's a Mount Nebo there or not. It's been a really weird kind of 36 hours. Because so much of the oxygen has been taken up by John Lewis's death. That CT Vivian got kind of pushed to the side. And also that the picture of John Lewis is beginning to get fuzzied. And so in closing, because I am going to close, I just ask, personal ask, it's that we remember that John Lewis was a full person and not just the quotes, the cue quotes that will come out about that he has said and written in his lifetime. He is more than just good trouble. He had a full life. He wrote quite a bit. And if you get the chance, I think it's still floating around. His original written speech that he was going to give at the March on Washington is floating on the internet somewhere. Go read it. It is just as important today as it was 57 years ago. So, okay, in Black church, all Black preachers go in conclusion at least 3 times. So this is time number 2. In conclusion, what is your Mount Nebo? And what is your promised land? And in conclusion, number 3, you always have a choice. Amen. Blessed be. May the good Lord be with you. May the 4th be with you. Whichever ending for a sermon fits you, may that be all and yours.
Thank you, Reverend Kim. I know I'll be thinking about Mount Nebo for quite a while now. May the truth that makes us free, and the hope that never dies, and the love that casts out fear lead us forward together until the day spring breaks and the shadows flee away. So let's read the words together for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now please enjoy our musical postlude. And for our announcements, we have a graphic here that shows our weekly events. Of course, every Sunday, there's worship on Zoom at 10 o'clock. And if you got here, you know the link, but here it is for your reference. Tuesday, an RE Learning Lab for Children and Youth with Miss Jess at 3 p.m. Thursday, Common Arts for DIY Hearts at 7. All makers and all ages are welcome. Join us in this open makers space to work on your current project with company. And other regular events on Wednesdays, there is the Still Singing group, the Family Fun Game Night, second and fourth Fridays of each month, the Buddhist Sangha, evenings on the first, second, and third Tuesdays, and the Heartfulness Meditation group, Mondays and Wednesdays. Oh, and Thursdays and Saturdays, excuse me. Reverend Dawn is away for the month of July, but will return in August, and will be available to provide pastoral counseling at that time. In the meantime, please reach out to our volunteer pastoral care team for support. So we warmly welcome all of you who are visiting today. Please stay and socialize in our online social time so that we can get to know each other better. Now let us share in a moment of silent reflection to consider today's message and the meaning it has in our lives.